We didn't have examples of healthy conflict resolution from other couples. When I remember at that time when I was so frustrated about our relationship and I would tell friends, it was just like, oh my God, it sounds like you guys should just like either give up or it's not really working out. And when I would talk to my parents about it or try to, my parents are, God bless them, but they were like, you can just pray about it. I'm like, prayers are not going to fix this.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we're here today to talk relationships.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep. We're in the fuck shame portal this month, and we are hitting it from all angles. All angles. So just know that you are a part of this. We all have shame in our lives in different ways that we battle with. Our children, our loved ones, we are all dealing with different aspects to this. So buckle your seatbelt, stay with us, and this is going to be a wild ride
today's
today.
Conversation is very much on theme with the conversations we've had before about infidelity and relationships and different forms of how to make that happen. And I'm ready for the review. Can we get a drum roll?
Let me see if there's anyone to do a drum roll. Oh, here she is.
I love that. It's like a xylophone drum roll is what that is.
She's excited.
Amazing.
She's excited. She's here. She's ready.
Here for it.
She's ready.
I'm sharing a 4-star review for y'all because they're not all 5 stars. TCE723 left us a message saying, love, but intros are too long. That's her accents. Literally love this podcast. Sophie and Dr. Jaffe, to our pure magic, and I feel your warm energy through my headphones every day. My only con for this podcast is I feel like the introductions leading up to the episodes are just too long. I find myself getting to work each day before the episodes even really started, and I have 30-40 minute commute. This morning, I was really itching to get to Lacey's interview, and by the time I heard her voice, I was at work and found myself getting frustrated. Love you guys a lot, but think the intros could be shortened a little, as most of it just repeated throughout the podcast anyways. Or it's things we already heard you discuss in previous episodes. Just a thought, sending much love, and then there's a star. I think we shortened our intros, especially for people like you.
Yep, that was an older episode, and we used to review what we're going to talk about a lot more. Now we don't really get into the actual interview at all. We let you have that towards the end, and we keep it usually around 10 minutes or less for the intro.
Exactly, and so I wanted to share that just as an evidence, not only do you get TCE? Do you get our package now? But when you leave us comments, we read them, we care about them, and we adjust.
Yep.
So thank you.
We're all learning and growing. We're learning and growing right here with you.
Always, always, always. And Sophie, you drew a card for us, didn't you?
So this deck is from Inner Compass. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I love Inner Compass. This one is specifically from her new Love Cards deck. So I'm reading. This one says, power of choice. Even though it sometimes doesn't appear to be, life will always give you the choice. Owning your power to choose can change your life. Will you follow your heart even when the odds are stacked against you? Detach yourself from all rational reasoning and considerations and ask yourself, what is it that you desire most? Feel into the moment and see what comes to mind first. Let go of any fear or attachment to what will be. After you have made a decision, to the subconscious solutions that were previously unavailable to you will suddenly present themselves. Do not let your fear of losing or missing out on a connection influence your decision. Likewise, choices based on expectations or opinions from others will not necessarily contribute to your own growth. Those are choices made for the benefit of another. If the other person is not receptive to what you set your heart on, allow yourself to reconsider the relationship. In turn, you also need to respect and accept decisions made by the other. You cannot change another person. Rather, inspire someone with your own decisiveness and right actions. Every day, you have the freedom to continue to shape your relationships in any way you see fit. There is no need to justify your decisions. The heart wants what the heart wants. The power of choice is yours to keep. Choose wisely.
Man, so I don't think we could have picked a better topic for today's talk. You know, relationships are oftentimes way more about choice than we give them credit for being.
Yeah.
I think too many times you and I, Sophie, have that agreement that if we're not in love anymore, then we will have to figure out how to part ways, because that would be a crappy way to be in.
Yeah.
What's ironic, and as I was listening to you reading that, I was thinking to myself, you know, sometimes I do get stuck in the day-to-day grind and we lose each other. Sometimes, especially now with the whole Corona thing, for like weeks at a time. So we just went away last weekend, not the one that just passed, but the one before. And I also look at that as a choice. You have to make a choice to leave the day-to-day behind and spend 2-3 days, a night, whatever you can with your partner, because that's really where I find that I love you again. Mm-hmm. Sometimes shit is fucking hard. Like, we talked so much on that weekend we were gone about here's how we're going to show back up. We're going to check in every day and it's going to be amazing. We both love it and we want it and we crave it. And then we show up and there's no space. Like,
yeah, I think everyone is handling quarantine in different ways, and there's a whole spectrum. I have some friends that are so lonely and so lonely, and they haven't seen people for weeks, and they barely talk to their friends anymore because some of their friends are parents, and we're all adapting differently and coping differently. And then there's us on the opposite end of the spectrum where we cannot get a minute to ourselves. And, you know, I had a phone call with a friend the other day, and she was like, I'm just so sad. I just miss you. And I said, I get it. I know. And there's nothing I can do about it. Like, there's just nothing I can do. But I said, I miss my husband and he lives in the same bed as I do. And that's truth.
Yeah.
I miss you, and you sleep next to me every night, because we're like two ships in many ways, and we have to take a concerted effort. Like tonight I said, I really want to have a date with you. Whatever that looks like, whether it means we lock ourselves in our bedroom and watch a movie and have takeout on the floor, we need to make time for ourselves. And that is forever evident. And you have to continuously choose your partner, not just your partner, but the relationship.
Yeah. In the context of the relationship, the conversation we're having on relationships today, sometimes people decide to choose multiple partners or other partners. The important thing is to keep listening
to yourself
and adjust, because there could be moments. Yeah. I mean, we've had our experimentation around like sexuality, but there could be moments where you're like, I'm done. Like, this is boring, or this is upsetting all the time, or this is not what I want. And then I get a day with you somewhere where there's not the distractions and there's not the noise, and we find each other again. And I think there's a lot of power in that as well. I think a lot of people, how do I say this? Like, a lot of people see the way they feel in the moment and think that that is an indication of how they feel at all times.
Right.
But environment and circumstances really, really matter.
Perspective is everything. Just get away from the thing. Like, if you're frustrated with your partner, just get away for half a day. Just separate for half a day. Go somewhere in nature and read a book, journal, find yourself, go on a long hike, whatever you need to do to recalibrate and find yourself and find that inner voice of what it is that you want. Because oftentimes the answer is within the relationship. It's just getting creative.
There's this woman on my hero program who came in for alcohol, and then her husband staged an intervention. And fortunately, then we had our family program, so he joined that. And in the third day of that program, he was on our group discussion, and she was going to come back home. She had left to be at her parents for a little bit, and she was coming back home. And he was saying how nervous he was. We were talking about expressing your actual emotions and talking to your loved one who's struggling about actually what's going on, not always pretending like you have the answer, etc. Mm-hmm. So he was talking about it, and I'd already talked to her, and I said, look, you know, the interventionist that you hired told you, hey, your wife's an alcoholic, she's got to go to rehab, that's how this works, I have a 100% success rate. And then obviously he doesn't, because who the fuck has a 100% success rate? And it failed. But the husband on this call, I was like, how long have you guys been married? And it's 24 years, they got 4 kids. So when was the last time you guys got away?
Yeah.
His answer was, I think, August of last year. Mm-hmm. I was like, do you wonder why you and your wife have struggles? And I'm not saying it's the only issue.
No.
I go, but you guys have been married for 24 years. My guess is if you look back 10, 15 years, you started losing the relationship.
Yeah.
And her specific case is different than others. The drinking has really escalated over the last like 5 to 7, 8, 9, 10 years. It's not since she was a kid or anything. I was like, you don't have your relationship.
Right.
And without your relationship, you both need to cope. So you go to work, she goes to drink.
Yep.
And
we just get into habits. We get into habits over time. We get lost in our habits. It's hard sometimes, the chicken or the egg, like which thing caused which. It doesn't matter. The point is that she's in a place of suffering. The relationship is suffering. Time to try something new.
yeah.
Period. There's no like one answer to any of this, which is why we share so much here, so honestly and openly. Relationships are fucking hard. They are the hardest thing in the world because they are your mirror, and they are going to constantly be showing you, amplifying what's within, mirroring back your insecurities, your fears, the issues that you haven't healed from childhood. That is what relationships do. That is why they are so hard, because it forces you to go inward and deal with stuff that is scary sometimes or hard or challenging.
Yeah.
But the point is we're here to support you. We are here to provide tools, tangible things that you can do right now to help your relationship. So go back and listen to old episodes. We can leave maybe a list of different relationship specific episodes that we've done previously. Try and think outside the box and keep an open mind. And we love you. Enjoy this episode.
Hallelujah and amen.
Mwah.
See you on the other side.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fixes all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to our, it's not a fireside chat. I don't know what to call it.
It's never been a fireside chat.
Don't ruin the secrets. To our Corona side chat. Sophie's crying in the corner. We've got Jo and Jonathan with us here today. And I think this is the first time we've had a couple on with a similar story to ours.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think so.
I think this is the first.
It's going to be a good conversation. I know that.
Love it.
Juicy.
So, Jo, I know you through Go Fit Joe. That's a profile I know you through. But you two recently started a podcast.
We did.
Are you from NorCal?
We are.
We are.
Hella Married. I knew
Hella
it.
Married.
So the podcast is called Hella Married. Nobody says hella outside of Northern California.
Out of the Bay Area.
Although it's been exported. It's been exported to other places. So you started a podcast about marriage, but you're not. It's not like a faith-based. Find your Christian other and then hold together till death do you part. What made you start this relationship-based marriage podcast?
So actually, it was me who had the idea to start it. I was actually sharing a lot of the stories of my growth on my Instagram profile, and Joanne was also doing the same on hers. And I just was, one day I wanted to find a place for us to be able to share our stories of our struggles and what we did together to succeed in our relationship. And one day I was just trying to think of a name, and Hella Married just came up. And I took I was surprised no one had actually had
The Instagram
the
account.
Instagram account.
It was a shock.
That's funny. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's
Amazing.
like so catchy, and I signed up and I just started posting there. And initially, it wasn't gonna be a podcast, but we got so many like gentle nudges from followers on the account, and it was a lot of, hey, you guys should start a podcast. So
yeah, and I think that it started all because people were like, you guys keep it so real about your relationship. You talk about the ups and downs, you talk about the fights, and we talk about like the nitty gritty, just even on Instagram. And for somebody like myself, whose public life or public profile is typically on the spotlight, or my private life and my life is like on the spotlight because of me being an influencer. It was one of those things that I know for myself in staying true to who I am. I just didn't want a bullshit story of like what our relationship was like. And so when people were always like, oh my God, you guys seem to be so perfect and you guys get communication down,
like relationship goals.
We're like, really? You have absolutely no idea what the hell that means to us. And so when we started our account, we really just wanted to bring to light some of the messy conversations that we were having in our relationship. And then it was basically coronavirus where we were like, I guess it's a good time to start a podcast since we're stuck at home doing nothing.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because let's be real, like relationships are messy.
Yeah.
They really are.
I always love concrete examples. Like let's just get right into it. Like what's one of those things that you shared either on the podcast or on Instagram where we've had this before. So if you're one of you looked at the other like, wait, we're gonna tell people about this? What's one that's come up like that for you guys?
One of I think the first ones was when I basically was like, you know what, we've faced the idea of divorce before. And that I think split the world open a little bit in terms of my audience of just like, oh my God, wow, thank you for saying those things. And, then it started from that then to we have trouble with sex and intimacy. Like we've been together for so long and we're still trying to redefine that. And then as of recently, we actually talked about the affair that I had and the infidelity that we both have been through. And following that, it was the non-monogamy. So we're just like one after the other. Let's just keep you going.
We're here to act as your mirror.
That's funny. I love it.
Yeah.
I remember I don't know if you remember this or what your take on it, but I remember we normally know that we dropped a good episode that people are going to like because when it's over, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe we just rehashed that.
Or even going into it when we share a really vulnerable episode, we both have nerves. We're like, oh, we're going to share that story today. And like the days leading up to it, I'm kind of in a crabby mood and emotional. And then
you're never in a crabby mood, baby.
No, never. Just the few times that the podcast had a vulnerable episode. That was it.
I'm just saying I hadn't noticed.
Yeah. But, and then also just like in it, like you can tell our nerves, even listening to it, you can hear that we're about to go into a subject that we're like, here we go. We're going to announce to the world that this is real. And then afterwards, we have a little bit of a vulnerability hangover. And that's how you know that you're sharing something that matters. And then luckily the response is really good and we're held. We have a really great community here that is non-judgmental. And some people that are like, wow, I can't relate to anything that you just shared, but it's a beautiful story. And even that, like that acceptance is so beautiful. That's what the world needs more of, is just acceptance.
Yeah.
When was divorce on the table for you guys?
Probably
so many different times.
Well, I think,
we've thrown the D word around so many times. But
I think like the real closest time was back in 2016, 2017, back in our old townhouse, and we were really kind of crumbling, and there was a lot of things that were being talked about, or a lot of blame being pushed around. Like Don had blamed my fitness journey for being one of the biggest reasons our disconnect was happening. We started to blame things like his, addiction to video games as one of the reasons. And really, it's like we both were to blame in different ways.
We both a little escape. You both found little escapes from the intimacy in the relationship.
Totally. So that's kind of like the first time that was that was brought up. And then, from there, it was just kind of like, let's really kind of dig inward in our relationship and figure out what are the things that we need to work on individually and then together.
What and who was the person that went from, hey, let's check out some lawyers, to there's things I need to work on? Because I think that's a huge step to go from blame to I have work to do.
Yeah. I mean, I know from that moment, I think when he pointed out it was my fitness journey that kind of brought us a little bit of a gap between us. I remember feeling like, okay, you know what? Here I was working on me, but clearly the working on me got to the point where that's an addiction, or that's kind of a coping mechanism or an escapism of the things that we need to work on within our relationship. And then I tailored that back to like work through things within us. And then for you, it was like the moment you started working with a life coach, when you started really kind of examining your own areas of your life.
That didn't actually come until quite some time later.
Yeah.
Like 2018.
Yeah.
So I think we never actually went as far as looking like into lawyers and whatnot, but like papers were printed and like we just throw the word divorce around. And I think what happened, and I know what happened, is like we kind of swept things under the rug. Like we'd argue, and then we would kind of work things out a little bit, and then things would seem good, but things were never really addressed on what we wanted to do next.
My piles of shit example.
Yeah, tell it. I don't think you've ever said it on the podcast.
No, it came up for me in a workshop.
Yeah,
we were weekend workshop in Seattle, and I feel like a lot of couples start out and it's like moving into a brand new house. Having a relationship is like moving into a brand new house. It's beautiful. You love the furniture, that kitchen. You're like, oh my God, that's my kitchen. The bathrooms are gleaming. The bed nobody's touched it. It's perfectly made. And you live in it for a while. And first of all, you get used to the furniture and all that stuff. But also then, like, the dog ends up shitting on the carpet. Mm. And in normal everyday life, you clean it up right away. But in relationships, what most of us do, we go, can you move like a chair over that pile of shit and we'll never talk about it again? Yeah. And it could look like anything, like a screaming fight at a restaurant where one of you cried and you're like, well, we're never going to that restaurant again. And nobody ever mentions the restaurant. You never walk by that restaurant. All the topics that were discussed at that restaurant are off the table. Let's say you went to a concert with some friends and it ended up being a shitty night. Well, never listening to that band, never going to that venue, never talking to that couple. We just start slowly, all these piles of crap that are just amass in our house. We cover them up. We put the rug over them. We move another piece of furniture. And each one seems like not that big a deal. It's the next day. You don't talk about it. You're like, whatever. We don't have to listen to Third Eye Blind. That was a joke. Ever again. And
thank God.
I know. And we just move forward. But what ends up happening is a lot of couples I work with, a lot of couples we see, end up in a place where they're on complete opposite sides of the house. The entire floor, all the furniture is covered with crap. Nobody can walk to anybody. You can't start a conversation. You can't talk about a topic. You can't listen to music without getting triggered left and right. And a lot of couples, that's the point where they start saying, I'm done. Because the idea of having to go deal with all that pain is barely, but just a little bit more pleasant to leave than to have to go clean it up. And unfortunately, and what it sounds like you guys are doing, partially even by having the podcast, and it's the experience we have, is you're going through and you're having the discussions and you're cleaning up the shit. And the beautiful thing about it is at the end is we get to find out is you get to live in a really, really nice house that you've lived in for a while and you really like, and now it's clean.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, as you said that, our daughter came on the podcast and talked about her thoughts on our open relationship and our non-monogamous relationship. And she had said something like, it's like cleaning a stain. You just got to scrub it out.
Yes,
you just got to scrub out. And, that just kind of reminded me of like what you said. It's like it's the same thing. It's like you have to really scrub at it until it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people give up earlier.
And put in the work. And I think in our society, we're so used to just moving on. And, we can't even like sit through a 5-minute video. Like literally when we make content now, we're like, how short can we make it to keep the attention span of everyone? Right. Like, wow, she had a great engagement on that. Oh, because it's a 4-second video. So yeah, it's great engagement because everyone watched it the whole way through. Like our society is so quick to like act ADD, even if we're not, and move on quickly and like, oh, well, we had a disagreement. Let's just move on. And friendships and jobs, people leaving careers because they have like one disagreement or they're not seeing eye to eye. Like, what about and there is a time to leave, and we honor that. You know, if you're not in love with your partner anymore, if there's domestic violence, if there's, circumstances that are not just a bunch of shit piles that you don't feel like cleaning up and raking up and digging up, like, and looking at those shitty piles, like that's what relationships are all about. So if we can lean into that instead of running away and being ADD, instead of sticking to something, I think that's really what we're concentrating on. Like we say we want to reduce the divorce rate, but really we just want people to work hard, roll up their sleeves, and give things a better chance than giving up just when things get hard and messy and gross.
Yeah. I mean, even for us, we're just like, we want, the reason why we started our podcast is because we want people to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like there are so many messy conversations. Like we've been together for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And in that 18 years, there's a lot of evolution of even just as individuals. And how do you respect one another, grow with one another, allow each other space to evolve while still also growing together as a unit?
Mm. It literally hasn't been until the past 2 years when both of us have actually learned how to have really healthy conversations, like difficult conversations that we needed to have. And the reason for that, in my own experience, in my upbringing, like I was raised in a traditional Filipino household. I never saw my parents fighting or arguing. I never saw them having tough conversations. I never saw resolve and resolution. I just saw a happily married couple that had everything, like they were doing everything right. My dad had a good job. My mom had a good job. I had my 3 older sisters, just that perfect quintessential American life. And it was kind of detrimental to who I was as a person, it being in a relationship with Joanne, because then when her and I would get into something, it was like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Can I dive in more deeply to that? So you're now an adult, your parents' relationship better. Is it because your parents never showed conflict around the kids, or they just literally didn't have conflict?
They didn't show conflict around the kids.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they had conflict, but because I think there's always conflict in relationships.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important thing for people to hear, right? Is like, because we have this dream, and I love that you said it's been the last 2 years that you've realized how to get into kind of responsible conversation. Sophie and I are still constantly learning how to be better at it. I wonder if you reach an endpoint. I don't know. I mean, we're definitely better at it now.
I think also it takes a lifetime of learning, where your blind spots are and what your trigger points are. Like a lot of things that I respond and react to with a D. Yes, many of them are triggers from our relationship. A lot of them are from childhood. A lot of them are like the way my mom would respond, the way my dad would respond, the way I watched my mom and dad fight, the way that I would fight with my ex, like all of these things that come through us. It's like, it's our job to really look at that. And I noticed my own growth even with other people. Like I had a conversation last week with my brother that was like a 2-hour conversation. And typically I would have just been like, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. But I sat through it and I was patient. And I don't think patience is necessarily one of my best traits. I think that I like kind of I wouldn't say it's one of my best traits, but with him especially, he triggers the shit out of me. And I sat through it for 2 hours and I was just like, I'm going to stick to this. And I think that that's really where you can see the growth is yes. And it's when you kind of go out and see the perspective of your growth in other ways, like business meetings and when things get frustrating and when you get challenges like thrown upon you,
Yeah. I mean, the other day was a really good example because our sweet little 10-year-old Olivia had gotten caught editing some school document, some PDF. And I told John, I said, okay, we're going to need to have this conversation with her, but I don't want to shame her because she made a choice that was wrong, but I don't want to shame her identity. I don't want her to start thinking that she's a bad person. I want her to acknowledge what she did. I want her to know that was bad, but I still need her to know. And I want her to know that she's loved that we love her, that this does not change anything about how we feel about her. And in that moment, like you were just saying, that's when I was witnessing my own growth. I was like, holy shit, I handled that really good as a parent. Because what would my parents have done? They would have been like, what did you do? Why did you do that? How dare you do that? I'm so disappointed in you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just make me feel so ashamed for a mistake or a choice that I maybe wasn't thinking about when I was younger, So
yeah, that's hard around kids. It's so easy to jump to the things that you saw working. And I think, as Sophie, like you mentioned, that's also the same thing that comes up in relationships. I mean, so your parents were together your whole life.
Yep.
What about you, Jo?
Yeah, they're still together.
Yeah.
And kind of like the similar, somewhat similar. I never saw them argue actually I lie. I saw them have a lot of arguments, but then disappear. And then the next day they were still going about their normal everyday type of routine.
Like never resolutions.
There was no resolution. And also I grew up in a household where my parents didn't really show any sort of affection either. And so for me, I'm like, what is this? Is this love? If this is love, I don't want it. Like, I don't want that example, because that's not one that I imagine what love is like for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have the wherewithal to know that. I just didn't see emotions really play a part in relationships at all.
Or affection.
Except for when people fought. Then
yeah.
So what do you think was the driver? Like, why the jump to, hey, we should get divorced, this isn't going to work?
I mean, I think it was just kind of like what we said, where you just, we didn't have examples of healthy conflict resolution from other couples. When I remember at that time when I was so frustrated about our relationship and I would tell friends, it was just like, oh my God, it sounds like you guys should just like either give up or it's not really working out. And when I would talk to my parents about it or try to, my parents are, God bless them, but they were like, you can just pray about it. I'm like, prayers are not going to fix this. We need to do some work and, we need to really, really dig in deep. And I think it was just like, there was so much shame around even having trouble in your relationships. Talking about it is even hard.
Totally.
So that was really difficult. So I think like it was the feeling of loneliness and the struggle of not knowing what to do. And then almost the shame and the vulnerability of like, do I have the ability do I have the permission to reach out for help outside of therapy? Just even the support of a community, of friends, of family.
Sadly, she reached out to my mom once for help.
Yeah.
And my mom said, maybe you shouldn't work as much.
To you or to Jo?
To me.
To Jo.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's not really going to happen here.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for the advice. Have a great evening.
Yeah. And also, like, not recognizing that maybe it's a core fundamental issue, not, like about the two of you, not that something that you can just like, oh, if I just stop doing that thing.
Right.
That will be okay.
Yeah. I'll just snap our fingers and work 10 hours less a week. And then, because clearly you're just neglecting him.
Yeah, totally.
Also, I think something that we've talked about a lot lately is like, where are you getting your advice from? Right. Like, most of my friends are single or, that live in LA or like in very new relationships. Like, should I really be getting marriage advice from them? And it's like, it's to no offense to them, but like, think about who you're getting advice from. Think about who you're sharing your information with and, how you connect about it. And is it safe and is it sacred? And, we're big sharers. We're all about sharing like our tough moments, the messy ones as well, because we help people to see that there's hope on the other side and that it's normal and reducing that shame and, normalizing there being issues in relationships. But really just thinking about like, in terms of who you go to for like when you are struggling, making sure that you're really thinking about who these people are. Like just because someone loves you doesn't mean that maybe they're the best person to like help you with your marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like when we realized that the best people to seek out advice or to talk to were friends who loved us as individuals and loved us as a unit. That was the most important because they looked out for our best interest. And they were always like, you know what, we we love you guys together. We understand if you guys can't be together, but we just want what's best for you guys as individuals.
That's beautiful. Yeah, to have that kind of support is so important in friendships and relationships. We all need, especially it takes a village to have a strong relationship. It takes a village to have kids. It takes a village to have a family. And we really lean into that because it feels good. It feels good to have people that you trust. And it's hard when things get tough. It's really hard, just like with any struggle. Adee does a lot of work with people and like struggling with addiction, but like whatever the thing is that you're bumping your head against, like if you don't have a support system, a strong support system, that's one of the hardest things, right?
I mean, yeah, definitely trying to do anything in isolation is tough. I mean, Jo, you mentioned there were no positive kind of examples to follow. There were no people to look up to in terms of, well, how is this even supposed to work out? And when you don't have that, you have to make it up on your own. But, you know, we don't really make up that much stuff on our own. We are creative in some ways, maybe, but most of the stuff is borrowed, repurposed, recycled knowledge from stuff we've seen before. And so I think this is also very important when people kind of pay attention to the role models, the things they've learned in life are the goals, because I think for many of us, our relationship goals are like model shoots and sitcoms and, you know, like
Disney
romcoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and like Disney
It's not reality.
princesses. And so when you think to yourself, like, well, I want my relationship to be like Prince Charming and Sleeping Beauty. Well, fuck off. That's not like cool. I'm glad that's what you want. But life is not a Disney ride, and it never was. It's like fantasy. It's like, I wish it was explained to us early in life that wanting your marriage to be like Snow White and her Prince Charming in the end is about the equivalent of wanting to be Superman. Like,
Yeah.
cool. Well, if you can figure out how to jump off a building with a cape and go save the world and fly around the world in reverse time, when you figure that out, we've got Prince Charming just waiting for you.
Well, and I hope that we, by sharing our stories, you know, we have people in our lives now that are like, you are relationship goals, but they're saying that based on knowing our full story. And that is beautiful, is to honor the entire trajectory, the entire journey, the ups, the downs, the ins and outs, and knowing that like that is what makes a relationship dynamic and beautiful and real and raw and vulnerable. And that, you know, that is what the goal is to access all of that with a partner or a few. Segueing into.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So you were considering divorce, you got a life coach, and then where did the like infidelity come in? What happened from there on?
Well, we moved into our new house. And it was kind of similar to your example, actually, of just like, we moved into this new house. It's beautiful. We love it. Everything is
pristine.
great. And then we started noticing just the shit that we thought we would leave behind in our old house with our old marriage. It came with us. And we had another hard conversation in 2018. And I looked at John and I said, I am falling in and out of love with you.
Because I asked.
Oh, yeah, you did ask.
I did ask. I asked her if she still loved me.
And I said, do you want the honest truth? And at this point, I was like, I'm going to model the transparency of our house that we live in, like in an iClo that has all these glass doors. And I'm like, I'm going to be fully transparent. I'm falling in and out of love with you. And when he asked me that, he asked, well, why? And I said, because I'm starting to see all these things that we talked about that were issues that I really needed to see change in our relationship because it was affecting the way I felt about our relationship, and they're still coming. All the late nights and the video games and the lack of desire to push forward with your own like personal growth. I'm starting to see that, and I'm starting to see how it's affecting our container of our relationship.
Yeah.
And so when that conversation happened, John bravely started working with his life coach to work on the emotional wellness side.
I was already working with him at this point.
Yeah, but I think you took a deeper dive
into
putting more work into myself.
Yeah, and I think also
I want to pause there because this is when I was saying before, like what allowed you to move from blame to, hey, I've got work to do on my own. This is one of those moments, it sounds like, and this is an important shift, right? It's hard to move to the place where you say, wait, my partner is saying things about me they don't like. And instead of me being offended and having to defend myself or hit them back, I'm going to actually go and work on those things that they mention. I mean, we just went through this on your birthday when I fucked up your birthday. And it took, I fucked it up royally. And she, we talked about it and it was clear. And I felt myself like getting flooded with shame because I screwed it up and I knew I screwed it up. But instead of being able to say that, I just shoved it up away. I was like, oh, well, we won't talk about that again. And so that was an example of it, but that's after years. It was a really touchy moment, but that's after years. I always call this kind of putting the gloves down and going in for the punch. What allowed you, John, at the time to say, hey, I'm hearing this stuff. My wife is like bitching me out that I'm not showing up and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do as the partner here, to go, you know what, hold up. I'm going to go call my life coach and go work on that.
Yeah. So I think at this point, it was already summer of 2018. I had already been working with my life coach for about 5-6 months. And, to actually hear her say, I'm falling in and out of love with you was a really, really hard thing for me to hear, because obviously moved into this new place. I thought I was like kind of getting my act together. And hearing her say this, it was crushing. And for me, I knew I had to make this decision for myself, that these patterns that she is seeing that came with us to this new house that we're at. I need to actually own up to this and hold myself accountable and take ownership of it, rather than just kind of, as you said, just brushing it off to the side. Because had I brushed things off to the side, I mean, I am I have so much love for my family and like my girls. For me to just even imagine what that might look like the idea of a separation and having to think about things of like custody, it's not something that I wanted, and I wanted to fight for the relationship. And in fighting for the relationship, I had to start working on myself.
It's beautiful. I love the sentiment of, there's the manly thing that always shows up, and it's not like men only experience it, but the masculine thing is what I'm talking about, which is like, I got to defend my honor and protect myself and not let myself get beat up, which somehow sometimes stand in the way of actually doing the work to stop the fight happening in the first place. Right. It's like, I was talking to one of my elite clients the other day, and it was, we build up these ideas of what our partner needs and what we can do and what our responsibility is. And sometimes in doing that, we stop listening to our partner about what they actually need. And then we wonder why it doesn't show up the way we want it to, because it becomes about our ego. Like, let me prove to you instead of let me listen to you and understand what you need. And then I have nothing to prove. My job is just to deliver what you want. And then if we can both do that, then we're pretty fucking happy and everybody's excited.
It was also during that same time when we both were like, you know what? I am not responsible for your happiness. I have the ability to support your happiness, but it's no longer my responsibility to make you happy. I will be there to support that. But actually making sure that you're happy, that is your internal job. And that's something that we both said that we needed to do. And also the guesswork of what you said about, guessing what your partner needs. We both said, you know what, we are both no longer trying to guess for each other what they need. We're going to be direct, specific, no bullshit. Like, there isn't like we've been together for 18 years already. You should know what I need by now. Like, that egotistical mindset, we just were like, fuck it. Like, that's not working anymore, because that's how we used to argue before.
Yeah, we've had those conversations.
Yeah, and just like being mad that they can't read your mind, being mad that they're not like anticipating your needs, desires, like, something that you think is obvious isn't necessarily obvious. Like, just learn how to communicate. That's on you to like open up that fucking throat chakra and like get messy, like start stretching your throat muscles. Like, it's up to you to express what it is you need. Like, what are we, 15 years now, 16 years, you're 18 years. They won't read your mind, right, on either side.
I still tell Joanne that. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I still can't read your mind.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you need to tell me what you need.
Still not.
And by the way, if there are people out there where your partner can't, kudos, write to us. That's amazing.
No, but also anticipating someone's needs and being like soft and accepting and listening. Like those are all beautiful skill sets, but that's different than reading someone's mind. You still need to express what you need.
Mhm.
Right.
Where did infidelity come in during this?
It was
Well, one night,
August 2018. He asked me again.
we were in bed and we were just having one of our, so we do this thing in our bed where we put the pillows on the side of the bed where our feet normally go, and we lay there and we have conversation. That's what we call it, conversation side. And we're on that side.
And sometimes there's MDMA and sometimes there isn't.
We can feel that.
We get that.
Some medicine.
Know that well.
Thank you, Joanne. So I asked her, I was like, what's one thing you haven't told me in the 16 years that we've been together?
And I told him that I don't think I believe in monogamy. And so that was kind of the start of a conversation of, okay, well, she doesn't believe in monogamy. We're in a monogamous relationship.
What does this mean?
What does this mean? Why don't you believe it? So we started exploring that whole conversation. And then through the process of us talking about non-monogamy and what we could potentially explore together within that, I was a human and made a choice that didn't include him and cheated on him one night with the partner that I'm still currently partnered with.
Because of the conversation, like the conversation felt like it gave you an opening.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Like it was just kind of like that timeline. And then it was also like, oh my God, this is like taking forever in a way. Like we were going back and forth about a month and a half or so. And I just found myself one night at his place. And I literally was coaching myself that night too. Like, you don't have to have this. You're attracted to him. John knows you're attracted to him. You don't need to go there. You can control yourself. It doesn't need to be this night. You're still having a conversation with John. Like, just figure out where your feelings sit with Chris. And I ended up making a choice that night.
She's the overeager and impatient one in the relationship.
Oh, I don't know. Who's that in our relationship?
I don't even know.
We're, so our,
Do you think I am?
No.
Oh, you think you are?
I was literally asking a question.
Oh, I thought he was saying like, and there was an obvious one. I'm like, I don't think there is an obvious one.
Well, the reason I was asking and I'm interested is, I mean, the infidelity in our relationship came with zero preparation. There was no conversation beforehand. We hadn't found each other really in the grand scheme of things, right? Like we were still very bad at communicating, not sharing what each other needed. So we didn't have a moment like that. So it's interesting that it was like, hey, can we open the window to non-monogamy and let some non-monogamy air in? And you like snuck out through the window a little bit.
I stuck out the window.
Yeah.
Okay. I totally stuck out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Side note, what are your sun signs?
I'm a Sagittarius and a Scorpio cusp. So my birthday's on 11/22.
Okay.
I'm a Gemini.
Gemini. Okay.
Which is the back and forth the whole time. It was like, yes, we'll do it. No, we won't. Yes, we'll do it. No, we won't.
Yeah.
And here I am, Sag, just like trying to bow and arrow the truth out of it.
Yeah, and Scorpio. A little bit of that, like,
I'm going to go out there.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I don't what none of those things mean, but I'm here for the ride. I'm trying to understand. So this is August 2018.
Mm-hmm.
When did you tell him about it?
A week later.
Okay.
Actually.
A
week later.
What made you tell him, like, what? I want to know more. Like, what happened around that?
So we still continue to talk about, exploring polyamory. So after John actually was amazing at this. I
did all the research.
He did all the research.
I was the one that found polyamory. And I was like, I think this is what she's looking for.
Right.
Because for Joanne, it wasn't about just hooking up with random guys and just sleeping around whenever she wanted to. It was more about like having intimate connection.
And should something physical happen, great.
Yeah.
But I was hoping for an opportunity to explore myself in other relationships is pretty much what I told John is what I think I want to do in terms of our non-monogamous exploration. And it happened, I don't remember exactly what date, but a week later, literally almost like about a week to the date that John was like, okay, you know what? let's do this. Let's open up the relationship. I'm pretty confident. You already know you like this guy. I want to meet him first off. And I remember sending Chris a text and I was like, okay, John's giving the green light. And Chris was like, you need to tell him immediately. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself another week or so because I need to figure out, muster the strength on how to tell him. And I literally ended up telling John that same afternoon that John said, let's open up the relationship. And Chris was like, you need to tell him sooner than later.
Yeah. Start fresh.
Especially if we're going to go down consensual, ethical, non-monogamy we already made a non-ethical choice in the beginning, but moving forward, we need to start making choices that are ethical, that are consensual, that everybody's fully aware of.
Yeah. One of our big focuses is radical transparency. And that's so important to be able to start. And that looks different for different people, but the point is just being on the same page. And, and people, I'm sure people listening right now maybe are curious or not sure where to start. I would say have a conversation with your partner and see just where both parties stand. Exploring with other human beings can be lots of different things. There are lots of directions you can go in. It could be one person wants to explore, the other person doesn't. It could be bringing another person or two into the relationship. It could be private relationships on the sides. It could be where you fill each other in on everything. It could be where you don't, but there's certain rules around it. And the idea is to make sure that the relationship is safe and that each person in the relationship feels heard, safe, held. And that the primary relationship is the most sacred and respected,
Yeah.
And by the way, as we've learned is, you make the best decision you can make at any given point in time. And this is, I guess, different in polyamory than some of the other systems. But then if the rules change in the middle and you're like, hey, so we agreed on this thing, but now it actually happened and I'm not really so sure, to be okay to back it up, pause and say, it's okay. Well, let's pause and reconsider. I think a lot of times in the same breath as the stuff we were talking about before, where people just don't have the honest conversation, they say, well, fuck it. I already committed to this. I hate it, but I'll keep going with it without saying anything.
That's not radical transparency.
It's not radical transparency and it's not respecting the relationship. Right. So,
and just knowing the idea is not just so you can be with other people. It's for us, it's about enhancing what we have and making ourselves better people. And any experiences that we've ever had with someone else has inevitably made us stronger. If in the moment it caused conflict, on the other side of that conflict is growth and is a new shared experience and is evolution. So I always say I like to lean into conflict. I actually look forward to times when we have an argument because it means on the other side of that, we're going to be closer. Even if it feels really challenging in the moment. But
that's why Mother's Day was much better than
Mother's Day was way better. That conflict.
Mother's Day was really good too, especially because the last year and a half we've been working on repairing and conflict and figuring out how to stabilize our polyamorous relationship. And it's beautiful now. We're all at a place where our girls know, they're let into it. They know everything about what happened, how it happened. And it's been, the last few months has just been really kind of the most stable I feel like it's been in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And that's when you started the podcast, right?
Just now.
We started a podcast just last month, actually in April. Yeah. But just the beginning of the year after we told our girls last December
it started feeling good.
Yeah, that mom has another partner. It felt like everybody was let in. Everybody that was important was let in. And that's all that mattered for us.
So big. So many places I think I can go.
Yeah. So that was when you decided to go poly.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think
2018, right?
2018. Yeah. So it was October of 2018. And, I don't think I actually realized that I was in love with him, in love with Chris, until maybe November and December. When in the beginning, of course, this is a new thing for us. It's going to cause conflict, right? No matter what, a change in a relationship, no matter what kind of change, is going to take some time to transition. And the first few months were really difficult. We worked with our therapist back and forth about all of it. There were moments where John was like, I don't think I can do this. This is too much. I'm working through the jealousy. I'm working through the envy.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, that's our next step.
We're gonna talk about that here because I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, John looked at me and was like, I don't think I can do this. And I don't think I can allow like for us to have a relationship with the guy that you cheated on me with, like anyone else but him. And I remember that conversation and I looked at him and I said, okay, if this is your choice and if you're really certain about this, I'm going to respect that because that's the agreement that we both made also coming into this. And I cried for like 2 hours as if I like was losing like
A piece of you.
a piece of me, actually. Like what I told him. I said, I feel like I'm losing a piece of me. I feel like I've lost something that came alive in me of a belief or a truth that I thought I held on to. And I know I made a mistake. I know I made a choice that moved ahead and moved a little too quickly. But losing that part of me just felt really hard. And so that's when I knew that I was in love because of that day. And also John held me for 2 hours while I cried over a morning, over a potential loss. And then, what was it? We went to New York and that was a really hard trip for the both of us also. And I don't know what changed your mind in that, but I think it was that experience of crying over someone else that made me realize, oh shit, like I have a deep, intimate connection.
And I think in that moment, in seeing how like torn she was, it wasn't just like this thing in her mind that she could like just have fun with. It was something that meant a lot to her. And I think it was sometime between then and New York, because we went on a trip to New York together, when I made the decision of like, if this is what you believe in and this is what you truly believe in, like, I'm committed to you. I'm committed to our relationship and I want to support you.
But we're going to have to take baby steps
But we're going
and we're
to
going to have to
take
figure this
little
out.
baby steps. Because I mean, obviously after finding about the infidelity and then working with our therapist, I had to learn how to give her new opportunities to build trust again.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was so crushing for me was because when she had expressed to me that she didn't believe in monogamy, I was the one who started doing the research. I found polyamory. Foundation of polyamory is like open and honest communication. And then I find out she cheats on me without letting me in. I'm like, the entire basis of this is like on open and honest communication. And you guys, I wasn't considered and I'm really, really hurt.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions, and just because I don't know, I'm just going to kind of fire them off, and then John, you can do what you want with them.
Go for it.
Obviously, the poly conversation, the most like media coverage of it goes the other way. Most of the conversations are girls hooking up with girls, and that's been accepted. Like, we've all been watching it in porn since we were like, well, for me, since I was 11, I don't know about anybody else, but that's like been integrated, right? The idea that that's okay. The other side is a much touchier subject. And it's something we've talked about before. And I've tried to wrestle and understand why I have such blocks around that. And it definitely deals with jealousy, and it definitely deals with ego and cockholding and emasculation and all these principles that are like entrenched social principles, right? They're not, there's no I mean, literally in our relationship, Sophie fell in love with a girl, which then created as much interesting conversation, sometimes conflict, sometimes work for us to do to understand where everything fits. It wouldn't have really technically mattered if it was a guy or a girl. It happened to be a girl. The emotional conversations around were the same, and yet there's something that feels different about it. And that was a really long lead to a couple of different questions that come up for me. First of all, in your polyamory, have you ever had the urge, the inclination to experience anything outside of your relationship? And B, what was that work like for you for those couple of months to go, oh shit, okay, like this is really what my partner wants and craves? she could end up being wrong and find that out, and then I'm still with her. But what does that look like for you?
So I guess I'll start with, I feel like this question always gets asked, like, whenever we go on IG Lives and we do a Q&A, people are always asking, and mostly it's like Joanne's followers, they're like, is John in another relationship? Like, that's always the question. Is John like looking for anyone to connect with? And I think like, why is that? Because like this whole
There's
like
this
eye for an eye,
of
that
like
you're in a relationship, that
justice, of evenness in a relationship, like equality in a relationship.
yeah. So initially, when we first opened up our relationship, I for myself identified as being monopoly, which is monogamous and poly in a poly relationship. But over like after being in a poly relationship now for God,
A year and a
like
half.
a year and a half, I've been more interested and excited to kind of explore for myself, because I see how Joanne shows up in our relationship as how she shows up in our relationship due to as like an extension of how she showed or her relationship with Chris. And then the other part, what was the other part?
How did you get to the point?
How did I get to the that was a lot of hard work, and that was a lot of therapy. You know, I remember when the first few therapy sessions that we were going through, I remember my therapist or our therapist always telling me that what I was doing was a powerful thing, and I couldn't make that didn't connect for me for such a long time. And I think I was fully able to like lean into this idea when I started loving myself, when I found like true self-worth in who I was, in that I was like a unique individual that no one was ever going to replace me. You know, because and with Chris, like the way his mind works, he's like so intellectual, and Joanne and Chris, they can just talk. They can talk each other's ears off. And although I can provide that to an extent, like that's just not me as a person. But if Joanne can go get that from their relationship, like she gets to come back to me, and I provide her something completely different that Chris will never be able to provide her with. You know, that like that humor, the dancing, the way I always say that, like the way I dance, you know. So self-love was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting about this, and we're going to get to our 5 questions here in a minute, because I could talk about this for 4.5 hours. So when I cheated on Sophie at the beginning of the relationship, the rationale in my head was always that I'm getting what I need. That at the time, for sure, Sophie wasn't in a place like the sexuality and sex in general came really loaded up for her from a past relationship. We've talked about it a lot on here, but like some sexual abuse and physical abuse in an old relationship. And so it wasn't old, it was the one right before us. And so the voice in my head was like, well, I don't want to put this on her, but I have these needs. And it literally made sense to me that I was getting him somewhere else. And what's interesting is you guys are talking, and 18 years later and a whole ton of work, is these concepts do somehow come together, with the main difference. And the main difference being you talk to your partner about any needs you're not having met. And then you come to a real adult, responsible, intimate, caring, empathetic decision with your partner about what the next best steps are for each other and for the relationship, in the context that, let's just be honest about it, brutally honest, there's not going to ever be a single partner on the face of the earth that can take care of every single need you have. Just not going to happen. So what do we do with that knowledge, right? Like, we all know it. Most people just quote unquote put up with it and just deal with it. What do you do in that context? Which I think is what you guys have solved.
Yeah.
And I think too, like we were talking about this actually just on our walk this morning. And I said, I think one type of relationship that might work out for you is somebody that you can connect with and literally just let loose with, because you can only do that to a certain extent with me, but we have so many different entanglements. We have a podcast now, we have this, we work together. There's so many things that we do together that letting loose is really difficult. And it's not that it's not impossible. It's just really difficult for us because we're so entangled. And I'm like, if you ever find a partner that you just like, I don't know, talk about bullshit things, and it doesn't lead down a road of business or the kids or whatever, that can be really fulfilling for you.
Yeah.
Because I could see how that could then allow you to feel resourced enough to come back into this relationship feeling really nourished when that particular need is being met.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Like it's something that's hard for you guys. It's not impossible, but it's hard given, we have a similar thing. We have 3 kids. We have so many businesses together, and we're both like pretty serious about helping the world be a better place. So then when we meet each other, we're like exhausted and drained. And it's hard for 2 drained people to fill each other up when like we're always on.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Yeah. And so beautiful. Just, we want to be as whole as we can for our partners. And, it looks like different things for different people. And that's really what the point of having, incredible guests like you guys on is, just to let people think outside the box, to not fit themselves into this mold of what society says something should look like. Everything can look different. And when Adi and I first met, I was 20, and he told me, something that didn't make any sense to me at the time, but now it makes so much sense. He was like, we can have whatever kind of relationship we want. We get to make up the rules. And I was like, no, we don't. And I just didn't understand what he was saying, but it's true. You have your own like fairy tale of your love, and you get to write it together page by page. And that can be different characters that come in and out. That could be different, events. That could be different adventures, children, whatever enriches the story to make it your own story that feels good for both of you. But it has to come back to honestly, the most radical, transparent conversations, being true with yourself, checking in with yourself before you make any big decisions. And then, like Adi said, reeling back when it's gone too far and honoring that and being like, okay, that crossed a boundary that didn't feel good. I want to reel it back now, and not being too shameful. And removing shame from the table. And that is one more thing I'd like to hit, is the 2 of you 2 talking about shame or just having shame as a conversation, because I think that that's something that you 2 specifically talk about a lot that I've seen.
Yeah.
Jo and Adi. And relating to this, but just in general, like how heavy shame can, I know you do a lot of stuff with fitness and body image and really like sharing that authenticity and how it's helped you heal. And I know you have the same thing with drugs and with all the things that you do in your life.
Yeah, I saw a lot of your body positivity stuff, Jo, and I was looking, and it's funny, Sophie always, I think you say this half jokingly, but you always say that like Adi has a body dysmorphic disorder.
Yes.
And I don't think it's anywhere near that bad, but we don't see ourselves the way other people see us. And where that really comes into sharpest focus for me is in those areas that we feel inadequate, and in the areas where we feel like we're not enough. Not like we are not doing things well, but like we are not enough. And no words of praise, no objective number on a scale, no number of likes or video views or anything like that fixes your self-concept, right? John, you talked about having to love yourself. Jo, I know as the person who cheated, there's a lot of shame that you just start carrying on, because once a cheater, always a cheater. I'm a piece of shit, and all the self-language, like it comes in, even if a moment beforehand you didn't see yourself that way. The moment you cross into this new box, you start seeing yourself in these ways. And I know, I wear a fuck shame my bracelet on my wrist. I have a sign on my wall, and it's something I have to remind myself of all the time, because those are the moments where I recede and I become less of who I really am, are the moments where I start feeling like my being, I'm not measuring up to some standard. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah. It's the same for me. And I think, when I think about shame, shame is one of those things that truly controls a person and a society and a culture. There's like no better way than to control someone's mindset in having them do something that they may not want to do with shame, right? Like that's the one way that you can control somebody. And you can control someone really, really well with shame, because then you challenge their self-worth and you challenge their self-confidence, like as you said. And I know for me, like when we launched the podcast episode 2 and 3, because we started talking about the infidelity, because we started talking about the non-monogamy, I was like, holy shit, I am about to have a scarlet letter A written all over my chest. I am literally changing the perspective that everybody possibly had shaped about who I am in that moment. And I remember hiding and just going, fuck, everyone's going to think I am a shitty ass person. Everyone's going to think I'm a bitch. Everyone's going to think that John is not here by choice. Like he has no autonomy for some reason, is what people are going to think.
That you're brainwashing
that I'm
me.
brainwashing you or coercing you to be here and be involved in this relationship with me. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, my kids don't see me that way. And if they're the best mirrors of bullshit meters and to tell me what it is that of who I really am, then I know within myself that I'm going to be okay and I can stand tall in that. And also it was one of those things where it was like, well, I know what I did. This is my truth. I'm owning up to it. There's nothing else you can tell me that I haven't said to myself already about this situation.
Totally.
And so anything else you want to say, like, thank you.
She's like Eminem at the end of 8 Mile.
That's the example I always use for people. Like, remember when Eminem talked shit about his own white trash upbringing?
Yep.
This is it. It's the secret to life. It's kind of insane. And I mean, I personally do like Eminem anyway, but it's a little funny to use 8 Mile as the end all be all of how you should behave in life. But if you get ahead of the things that you're most scared of, nobody will ever be able to use them against you. And it's a powerful thing. I think that would be really cool to leave this on, because there are a lot of people listening right now who are connecting in this moment to some of those things that they feel unworthy about or less than. And if we can leave them feeling empowered to just find that actually sometimes it's in those things you hate the most about yourself. That's where your biggest strengths actually lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you both so much for being on here. We've got 5 questions.
Sure.
We ask everybody.
Yeah. And if you can also just like one of you answer as a couple, or both of you can answer, whatever you like. So the first is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I'll let you answer this one. Don't look at me.
Yeah. And it's also like whatever comes to mind.
I think the best advice that I've ever received was to just be true to yourself. I mean, as like bullshit as that sounds, it is the best thing. And I feel like this is the first time in my life, in the 37 years of my life, that I'm being 100% true to myself. And it feels so good in my body, and it feels so good for all the relationships that I have.
It's awesome.
Love that. What has been one of your proudest moments to date?
Healing from something like infidelity through self-love. Yeah. And through forgiveness.
As someone who I have cheated on a D and he's cheated on me, but I know that, you know, each time that we went through some of the lies and the cheating on his side, you know, those feelings come up of like, oh, well, then maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough, tall enough, pretty enough, blonde enough, black enough, brown enough, whatever it is, right? Fill in the blank. It's not about you. So if you're someone that's in a relationship and you've been cheated on, or like potentially, it's not about you. So if you can heal that part and find that part of loving yourself and making yourself whole, it will only help you on your journey.
What has been your hardest moment to date?
Oh, I think my hardest moment to date was telling our girls about everything. That was a really tough moment for me in that moment, because it was like, will they judge me? And of course they didn't, but it was still one of those moments where you're like, oof, this feels really, really hard.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think for me, it's just, and I think this is always going to be a work in progress, is like really overcoming my own shame.
Yeah.
I have a pretty big shame monster. We gave it a name. His name is Julk.
Julk?
Mm.
Yeah, kind of like Hulk, but Filipino, and he talks in like Filipino gibberish.
Obsessed.
I love it.
I love giving a name to it. We had a couple on a long time ago that would give their names
To different personalities.
to different parts of themselves and different personalities. I love that so much. It just brings light to it.
Mhm.
At least you get to go, hey, Julk has something to say.
Yeah.
Joanne told me whenever Julk comes out, I need to wear like an extra small shirt with like
Oh, I like
a
it.
picture of Hulk, like my face photoshopped on it.
Yeah.
So that way I would snap out of it.
Like a tummy shirt.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, belly shirt. I love it.
What are your self-care rituals?
Mine is self-pleasure, masturbation.
Mm.
One of mine. Tantric also, or tantric masturbation.
My biggest one is journaling.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. It helps slow me down and like really find out what's going on inside of me.
Do you do it in the morning or in the evening?
Morning.
Morning, for both of us.
Jo, morning or evening?
Morning. Yeah. Why?
She's like, I want to balance out the question.
I meant
I know.
Oh, the masturbation part.
Yeah,
all
pleasure.
times during the day.
anytime. Yeah.
Anytime. Sometimes it's 2 p.m.
She's trying to close the orgasm gap.
She's journaling while she's going.
She's trying to close the orgasm gap. I like it. Between the two of you or just in the world in general?
Just in the
I mean, there's a female orgasm gap, so we're just trying to close that, you know?
Love it. I love it. Get it. Okay, this podcast is called Ignited. What ignites both of you?
You can go first.
Speaking our truth.
Yeah, actually, I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Good job.
Good job.
Damn.
You guys must have known each other for a while.
Yeah. A couple days.
Yeah.
Alignment.
I love it. I always love the answers to those questions. So here's the thing. This is a work in progress for you guys. You guys are literally taking people along on the journey, which I love. It shows bravery and, it'll be a journey.
Yeah.
What are some near future wins, some things that you guys are like embarking on that you're excited / nervous about? What's the next 6 to 12 months like for Jo and John?
Well, for me, I'm going to be launching a 4-week course on relationships and communication. So that'll be really exciting. John, you're going to be doing...
I give you something that I'm nervous and excited about in 24 months.
Okay. What's that?
Potentially moving to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
There might be a conversation about living apart but together.
Yeah.
Got it. Hey, we've had somebody on the podcast that did that.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I can't wait to keep following your journey. Thank you.
Thanks for opening your hearts and being honest and radically transparent and for sharing your story so vulnerably.
Yeah, thank you for
guys.
holding space for our story. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Hey, for the rest of you listening, if this is not a podcast episode where you want to share lessons from it and where these things touch you, just please screenshot right now, tag at GoFitJo, at Hella Married, me at Dr. D. Jaffe, and at Sophie.Jaffe, and let us know what you thought.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.